The apartment existed in that particular grade of poverty where every surface felt temporary. Rented furniture showed through worn upholstery, revealing foam that had lost its shape years before Maya Chen moved in. The walls held nail holes from previous tenants' attempts at decoration, patched with spackle that didn't quite match the beige paint. Morning light filtered through blinds missing every third slat, casting uneven shadows across a living room that contained everything Maya owned and still felt empty. She sat at a card table that served as desk, dining surface, and craft station for her daughter, staring at the stack of bills that had arrived with yesterday's mail. The numbers blurred together after the first few items. $18,000 in credit card debt, accumulated during the divorce when Marcus had drained their joint accounts and left her with legal fees she couldn't afford but couldn't avoid. For $1,200 in medical bills from Lily's emergency appendectomy 6 months ago, the surgery that had saved her daughter's life and destroyed what remained of Maya's financial stability. Rent due in 11 days. $1,450 for 2 bedrooms in a complex where the hot water worked sporadically and the parking lot flooded every time it rained. Her phone sat face up beside the bills, displaying her bank balance with the cruel precision of digital banking. $287.43. She had $287.43 between her family and complete collapse, between maintaining the illusion of stability and admitting to her 8-year-old daughter that they were drowning. Lily emerged from the bedroom, her school uniform showing the careful patches Maya had sewn over holes that kept appearing despite Maya's best efforts to buy quality. The girl's backpack, purchased from a thrift store, bore another child's faded name crossed out with permanent marker. She carried herself with the particular carefulness of children who'd learned that complaining made things harder for the adults they loved. "Mom, are we still going to the aquarium for my birthday?" Lily's voice held hope wrapped in resignation, the sound of a child who'd learned to ask for things while already preparing for disappointment. Maya's throat closed. The aquarium trip had been promised 3 months ago, back when she'd had a full-time position as a marketing coordinator for a startup that folded 2 weeks after her probation period ended. Back when she believed that hard work and competence guaranteed employment. Back when she hadn't yet learned that the economy didn't care about single mothers with rent due and daughters who wanted simple things like aquarium visits. "We'll see, sweetheart. My job interview today might change things." Lily nodded with understanding beyond her years, then asked the question that cut deeper than any bill. "Is Dad sending money this month?" Marcus. The name still carried bitterness Maya tried to keep from her voice. Marcus, who'd been charming until the pregnancy test turned positive. Marcus, who'd been supportive until fatherhood required actual sacrifice. Marcus, who'd found a 23-year-old paralegal more interesting than his wife and infant daughter. Who'd hired an expensive lawyer while Maya represented herself with legal aid documents printed at the public library. "Dad's situation is complicated, baby. We're handling things ourselves." The truth was simpler and more cruel. Marcus sent exactly $400 monthly in child support, the minimum the court had ordered after his lawyer successfully argued that Marcus's income as a freelance consultant fluctuated too much to justify higher payments. Never mind that Marcus now lived in a condo downtown with his new wife, posting Instagram photos of weekend trips to wine country, while Maya chose between groceries and electricity. Lily accepted the non-answer the way she accepted everything, with a quiet resilience that made Maya's chest ache. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, generic cereal that turned milk gray, toast from day-old bread, orange juice stretched with water until it barely deserved the name. Maya braided Lily's hair with the efficiency of someone who'd perfected the motion through years of practice, then walked her daughter to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The other mothers at the stop existed in a different economic reality. They wore athleisure that cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget, discussed vacation plans and home renovations, compared notes on private tutors and summer camps. Maya stood at the periphery, nodding politely when conversation drifted her direction, acutely aware of her thrift store jacket and shoes resold twice already. Jennifer Morrison, president of the school's parent association and owner of a house Maya had seen featured in a local magazine, turned toward her with the particular smile wealthy women reserve for less fortunate acquaintances. "Maya, are you volunteering for the spring fundraiser? We really need people who can commit to the planning committee." The invitation came wrapped in concern that felt more like judgment. Maya knew what Jennifer saw. A single mother who never contributed to bake sales or chaperone field trips, who sent her daughter to school in patched uniforms and used backpacks. Someone who took more from the community than she contributed. "My work schedule makes volunteering difficult right now." Jennifer's smile tightened with practiced sympathy. "Of course. I can't imagine how hard it must be managing everything alone. Marcus seems to be doing quite well, though. I saw him at the Riverside Gala last month. His wife is lovely." The comment landed exactly as intended, a precision strike disguised as casual observation. Maya manufactured a neutral expression, refusing to give Jennifer the satisfaction of visible pain. "I'm happy he's doing well. Lily benefits when both parents are stable." The bus arrived, mercifully ending the conversation. Lily waved from the window, her smile bright despite everything they lacked. Maya waved back, holding her expression until the bus turned the corner, then let her face fall into the exhaustion she carried like a second skin. The job interview took place at a digital marketing agency occupying the 5th floor of a renovated warehouse downtown. Maya arrived 20 minutes early, her only professional outfit pressed carefully to hide the fact that it had served her through interviews for the past 2 years. The reception area showcased the kind of aggressive modernity that signaled success. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, furniture that looked uncomfortable and expensive. She filled out application paperwork while young professionals moved through the space with the casual confidence of people whose rent checks never caused anxiety. 20-somethings in designer casual wear, discussing campaigns and metrics and client relationships, building careers in an industry Maya had once believed she understood. The interview itself followed a pattern Maya recognized from a dozen similar meetings. The hiring manager, a woman barely 30, reviewed Maya's resume with the particular expression that meant she'd already identified the problem. "Your experience is impressive, but there's a 3-year gap here. From 2019 to 2022. Can you explain that?" Maya delivered the practiced explanation, the one that tried to frame necessity as choice. "I took time to focus on family during my daughter's early years. I maintained skills through freelance projects and online courses." The hiring manager's nod conveyed polite disbelief. They both knew the truth. The gap represented years when Lily had been too young for full-day care, when daycare costs exceeded Maya's earning potential, when Marcus's support barely covered groceries. Years when the job market decided Maya was obsolete, her skills degraded by absence, her value diminished by the crime of choosing motherhood over continuous employment. The position requires significant overtime during campaign launches, sometimes 60-hour weeks. How would you manage that with family responsibilities? The question was illegal, technically, but Maya had learned that pointing out legal violations during interviews guaranteed rejection. She delivered another practiced answer. "I have reliable childcare arrangements and can commit to whatever schedule the position requires." The lie tasted bitter. Her childcare arrangement consisted of a neighbor who charged $15 an hour, more than Maya could afford for occasional babysitting, let alone 60-hour work weeks. But admitting limitation meant admitting unsuitability, and unsuitability meant another rejection, another month of watching savings evaporate and bills accumulate. The interview concluded with promises to be in touch that Maya recognized as soft rejection. She walked back to her car, a 2008 Honda with 180,000 miles and a check engine light that had been illuminated for so long she'd stopped noticing it, and allowed herself 30 seconds of despair before forcing competence back into place. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Can't do pickup this weekend. Something came up. We'll make it up to Lily." Something came up. The phrase Marcus deployed whenever fatherhood conflicted with convenience. Maya deleted the text without responding, already calculating how to break the news to Lily, who spent every Thursday excited about the weekend visitation that gave her 2 days with a father who treated parenting like optional entertainment. The afternoon passed in the particular purgatory of job hunting. Applications submitted into digital voids that rarely responded. Cover letters customized for positions that required experience she didn't have or education she couldn't afford to pursue. Networking emails sent to contacts who'd stopped replying after the third unanswered message. By 4 o'clock, she'd applied to 16 positions and felt more hopeless than when she started. The mail arrived through a slot in the apartment door with mechanical precision. Mostly bills and advertisements, occasional notices about missed payments and accounts sent to collections. But one envelope stood out, heavy paper stock embossed with a law firm's letterhead. Morrison & Associates, Maritime Legal Services, Portland. Maya opened it with the peculiar detachment of someone who'd received enough legal correspondence to recognize that official envelopes rarely contained good news. The letter inside was printed on expensive paper, the kind that suggested the law firm didn't worry about operational costs. Dear Ms. Maya Chen, we are writing to inform you of an inheritance matter concerning the estate of your maternal grandmother, Lin Wei Chen, deceased September 15, 2024. During the settlement of Mrs. Chen's estate, documentation was discovered regarding a maritime salvage claim filed in 1987. Mrs. Chen held partial ownership rights to a sunken vessel designated as Spice Trader Prosperity, which foundered off the Oregon coast in 1891. Under maritime salvage law, ownership rights to wrecked vessels can be inherited by descendants of original claimants. As Mrs. Chen's sole surviving grandchild, you are entitled to claim ownership of the vessel and any recoverable materials. The vessel remains in situ at documented coordinates and has been designated as abandoned salvage by the U.S. Coast Guard. To claim ownership, you must pay outstanding salvage registry fees totaling $650, which will grant you full legal title to the vessel and any contents. Please contact our office within 30 days to proceed with the claim. Maya read the letter 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood something fundamental. Her grandmother Lin Wei had died 2 months ago in a nursing home where Maya had visited monthly, bringing Lily along to ensure the old woman didn't spend her final years entirely alone. They'd been close in Maya's childhood, before marriage to Marcus had created distance measured in more than miles. Lin Wei had spoken often about the past, about immigrating from Taiwan in the 1960s, about her late husband's work with shipping companies, about opportunities lost and found. But she'd never mentioned owning part of a shipwreck. Maya called the number listed, reaching a paralegal who confirmed the letter's contents with bureaucratic efficiency. Yes, Miss Chen, the salvage claim is legitimate. Your grandmother purchased a quarter-share interest in the wreck recovery rights in 1987 as an investment. The operation never materialized due to funding issues, but the ownership claim remained valid under maritime law. The $650 covers registry fees, title transfer, and legal documentation. Once paid, you'll have full ownership of the vessel. What's the vessel worth? The paralegal's pause carried weight. The ship itself has negligible material value. It's been underwater for over a century and is largely deteriorated. However, ownership conveys salvage rights to any cargo or materials that might be recovered. Whether that's worth pursuing depends on factors beyond my expertise. Maya thanked her and ended the call, staring at the letter while Lily did homework at the card table behind her. $650. The fee represented nearly 3 weeks of careful grocery shopping, a month of the utilities payment plan she negotiated with the power company. It was money she didn't have for something that probably had no value. But it was also her grandmother's legacy, the only thing Lin Wei had left behind besides photographs and recipes and memories of a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put Maya's mother through college. A woman who'd believed in planning, in investment, in securing futures even when present circumstances felt overwhelming. Maya pulled up Google, searching for information about salvage claims and shipwreck values. The results painted a complicated picture. Most wrecks held minimal value, their materials degraded by salt water and time. But occasionally, very occasionally, salvage operations recovered cargo worth millions. Historical artifacts, precious metals, rare materials that commanded extraordinary prices from collectors and museums. The spice trader Prosperity. She searched the name, finding scattered references in maritime history databases. The vessel had been a merchant ship operating along the Pacific coast, part of the spice trade that had enriched European powers and connected continents. It had foundered in a storm, taking its cargo to the bottom along with 17 crew members whose names were lost to history. She found a forum post from a marine archaeology enthusiast who'd researched the vessel. The Prosperity was known for carrying high-value cargo on its final voyage. Manifest records suggest a substantial load of saffron, pepper, and cinnamon bound for San Francisco markets. If any of that cargo survived in sealed containers, the historical value could be significant. Saffron from the 1890s will be priceless to collectors and researchers. Maya's heart rate increased despite her trained skepticism. This was probably nothing. Almost certainly nothing. A deteriorated wreck that would cost more to salvage than any potential value justified. But the word priceless echoed in her mind, competing with a more rational voice that warned against spending $650 on fantasy. She looked at Lily, bent over math homework with the focused determination of a child who took education seriously because she'd learned early that effort mattered. At the bills stacked beside her laptop. At her bank balance displayed on her phone screen. $287.43 between them and disaster. What if the wreck held nothing? She'd have wasted $650 she couldn't afford, money that could have covered groceries or utilities or the gap between checking and empty. But what if it held something? What if her grandmother's investment 37 years ago had been one of those rare gambles that paid off in ways Wayne never lived to see? Maya opened her email and began typing a response to Morrison and Associates. Her hands shook slightly, adrenaline and terror mixing in equal measure. She was about to spend money she didn't have on a shipwreck she'd never seen, based on nothing more than a legal letter and her grandmother's faith that long-shot investments sometimes paid off. The payment went through, depleting her checking account to $362.57, triggering an overdraft that would cost her another $35 in fees. She sat back, staring at the confirmation email, wondering if she'd just made the stupidest decision of her life or the bravest. Lily looked up from her homework, sensing her mother's tension. "What's wrong, Ma?" Maya manufactured a smile that felt like lifting something heavy. "Nothing's wrong, sweetie. I just inherited something from great-grandma Lynn, a ship that sank a long time ago." Lily's eyes widened with the uncomplicated excitement of childhood, where sunken ships meant treasure and adventure rather than financial risk and desperate gambling. Like a pirate ship? With gold. More like a merchant ship with spices. Probably nothing valuable. But it belonged to great-grandma, so it matters. The girl accepted this with solemn understanding, returning to her math problems while Maya sat with the weight of her choice. She just bet their grocery money on a shipwreck. She just gambled with resources they couldn't afford to lose on the possibility that her grandmother's decades-old investment might hold value. The confirmation documentation arrived via email within hours. Legal title to the spice trader Prosperity, along with coordinates marking its location 12 miles off the Oregon coast, salvage rights conveyed in full, insurance waiver acknowledging the vessel's age and condition. Maya printed everything at the library the next day, using guest computer access to avoid the 10 cents per page that would have added up to several dollars she couldn't spare. She stared at the coordinates, translating them into something comprehensible using Google Earth. The wreck sat at a depth of approximately 200 feet, deep enough to require specialized diving equipment, but shallow enough that salvage was theoretically possible. The ocean floor around it appeared relatively flat, no major obstacles visible in the bathymetric data. That evening, she called the one person she knew with any connection to maritime work. David Torres had gone to high school with her brother, had briefly dated Maya herself before she'd met Marcus. He'd become a commercial diver, working on underwater construction and occasional salvage operations. They'd stayed loosely connected through social media, exchanging birthday wishes and occasional comments. His voice carried surprise when he answered. Maya? Wow, it's been years. How are you? She explained the situation in broad strokes, trying to sound practical rather than desperate. I inherited salvage rights to a wreck off the Oregon coast. I'm trying to figure out if it's worth investigating or if I just wasted $650 on a pile of rotted wood. David's low whistle suggested he recognized the complexity. Do you have the coordinates? I can look up the wreck, see what information exists in salvage databases. She rattled off the numbers, hearing keyboard clicks as he input the data. His silence stretched long enough that Maya felt her stomach drop, assuming he'd found nothing. Maya, this is the spice trader Prosperity. There are notes in the Maritime Archaeology database about this vessel. It's been on the National Register of Historic Shipwrecks since 2003. That designation comes with preservation requirements, but it also means someone considered it historically significant. Hope fluttered in Maya's chest despite her efforts to suppress it. What does historically significant mean in practical terms? Means the vessel or its cargo had enough importance to warrant official recognition. Could be architectural significance, could be cargo, could be historical context. The database notes mention suspected high-value spice cargo that was never recovered. If any of that survived in sealed containers, you're looking at serious money. Maya's throat went dry. How serious? Depends on condition and quantity. But historical saffron from the 1890s? If you found even a few pounds in good condition, collectors and museums would go crazy. Saffron from that era, properly preserved, could sell for $10,000 per ounce. Maybe more. The number hit like physical impact. 10,000 per ounce. She did quick mental math, trying to calculate how many ounces might have been aboard a merchant vessel dedicated to spice trade. Pounds? Hundreds of pounds? The potential value spiraled beyond comprehension. David's voice returned to practical matters. But Maya, investigating this properly requires specialized diving, underwater cameras, maybe submersibles depending on the wreck's condition. You're looking at minimum $20,000 just to do a preliminary survey. Do you have that kind of capital? No. The word came flat, honest. I have negative $362 and a daughter who needs new shoes. His pause carried understanding. I might know someone who could help. There's a marine archaeologist at Oregon State who specializes in historical cargo recovery. Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She's always looking for wrecks to study, and if the Prosperity has historical significance, she might be able to access research grants that would cover survey costs. Maya's hands trembled as she wrote down the contact information. Why would she help me? I'm nobody. I don't have credentials or connections. You have ownership. That's leverage. If she wants to study the wreck, she needs your permission. You could negotiate a partnership where she covers costs in exchange for academic access to findings. Any commercial value from cargo sales would still be yours. They talked for another 20 minutes, David explaining the basics of salvage operations and ownership rights. By the time they hung up, Maya had a plan that felt simultaneously audacious and insane. Contact Dr. Mitchell, propose a partnership, hope that an academic researcher saw potential in a wreck that had waited at the bottom of the ocean for 133 years. She sent the email that night, carefully crafting language that sounded professional despite having no idea what professional meant in marine archaeology. She explained her inheritance, her grandmother's salvage claim, the vessel's historical designation. She attached the legal documentation proving ownership and asked whether Dr. Mitchell might be interested in investigating the site. The response came within 12 hours, faster than Maya had dared hope. Ms. Chen, I'm very familiar with the spice trader Prosperity. My doctoral dissertation covered merchant vessels in Pacific spice trade, and the Prosperity was a significant case study. The vessel's manifest indicated substantial high-value cargo, including approximately 800 pounds of premium saffron from Kashmir. At the time, this represented one of the largest private saffron shipments in West Coast history. If any of that cargo survived in sealed containers protected from water damage, we're discussing potentially the most significant historical spice find in maritime archaeology. I would very much like to discuss investigating this site. I have discretionary research funding that could cover initial survey costs. Are you available for a call tomorrow? Maya read the email 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood. 800 pounds of saffron. She pulled up commodity prices, trying to calculate modern market value even before factoring historical significance. High-quality saffron currently sold for $5,000 per pound. 800 pounds meant $4 million at standard market rates. But historical saffron from the 1890s? Dr. Mitchell's dissertation research would have made her an expert on likely premiums for archaeological specimens. She called David immediately, reading him an email with shaking voice. She says, 800 pounds of cashmere saffron. David, what am I looking at if even half that survived? His stunned silence said everything before his words confirmed it. Maya, if you found 400 pounds of 1890s cashmere saffron in salvageable condition, you could be looking at $50 to $100 million. Museums, collectors, pharmaceutical researchers studying historical compounds, luxury food markets wanting to sell authentic Victorian saffron to billionaires. The market would be insane. $100 million. The number refused to feel real, too large to fit inside Maya's understanding of money. She earned $15 per hour doing freelance social media management when she could find clients. Her rent was $1,450. She'd recently celebrated successfully negotiating her credit card minimum payment down to $200 monthly. $100 million existed in a reality so distant from her life that it might as well have been monopoly money. But the email was real. Dr. Mitchell was real. The shipwreck was real, sitting 12 miles off the Oregon coast at coordinates she could pull up on Google Earth, waiting. She scheduled the call for the following afternoon. After dropping Lily at school and before the evening shift of job applications she'd been submitting with mechanical persistence. Dr. Mitchell answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the focused enthusiasm of someone who'd built a career around obsessive curiosity. Ms. Chen, thank you for contacting me. I've been aware of your grandmother's salvage claim for years. The Prosperity has been on my research list since graduate school, but previous attempts to contact Mrs. Chen were unsuccessful. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm excited you've chosen to pursue the claim. They talked for 90 minutes, Dr. Mitchell explaining the historical significance while Maya tried to absorb information that felt like drinking from a fire hose. The Prosperity had been owned by the Pacific Spice Trading Company, which operated merchant vessels along the West Coast during the 1880s and 1890s. The vessel's final voyage had carried cargo worth approximately $2 million in 1891 currency, representing one of the most valuable spice shipments of the era. The manifest listed 800 pounds of cashmere saffron stored in sealed copper containers designed for maritime transport. Copper containers from that era were remarkably effective at preventing water infiltration. If those containers remained sealed, if they settled in silt that protected them from current damage, if the hold where they were stored didn't collapse, the saffron could have survived in nearly pristine condition. Maya heard the layers of if that separated hope from reality. What are the odds those conditions were met? Honestly, maybe 20%. Most cargo from wrecks of this vintage deteriorated completely. But the Prosperity went down in relatively calm waters, settled upright, according to early salvage surveys, and sits at a depth that limits certain types of degradation. There's a real chance we'll find something significant. Dr. Mitchell outlined a plan. She'd secure funding through Oregon State's Marine Archaeology Department, covering initial survey costs estimated at $35,000. They'd conduct underwater imaging to assess the wreck's condition, identify the cargo hold location, and determine whether sealed containers remained intact. If the initial survey showed promise, they'd pursue more extensive excavation. In exchange for covering costs, Dr. Mitchell wanted academic rights to study and publish findings. Commercial value from any recovered cargo would belong to Maya, minus survey costs, and a 15% finder's fee for the university. The arrangement sounded almost too good to be true, which made Maya suspicious. Why such generous terms? You're covering all the costs and taking most of the risk. Dr. Mitchell's laugh carried genuine warmth. Because I'm an academic, not a salvage company. My value is in research and publication. If we find historically significant cargo, I get a career-defining paper and probably tenure. You get the commercial value. It's a partnership where both parties benefit from different aspects of the same discovery. Maya agreed, signing contracts she barely understood, partnering with a woman she'd never met in person, gambling everything on the possibility that her grandmother's 37-year-old investment might actually pay off. The preliminary survey was scheduled for 3 weeks out, time that passed with agonizing slowness. Maya continued the mechanical routine of survival, job applications, freelance work, stretching groceries, explaining to Lily why they couldn't do the things her classmates took for granted. She told no one about the shipwreck except David, superstition and fear of disappointment keeping her silent. Jennifer Morrison caught her at the bus stop one morning, her expression carrying practiced concern that felt more like judgment dressed in sympathy. "Maya, I wanted to ask if everything is all right financially. Lily mentioned you had to cancel her birthday plans. The Parent Association has a discretionary fund that can help families experiencing temporary hardship." The offer landed with the weight of public humiliation disguised as charity. Maya felt other mothers' attention focus on her, measuring her response, confirming their assumptions about the single mother who couldn't afford school fundraisers or birthday aquarium trips. "We're fine, Jennifer. Just busy schedules. But thank you for the concern. If you change your mind, the offer stands." No one should be too proud to accept help when they need it. The subtle accusation that pride rather than dignity motivated Maya's refusal hung in the air like smoke. Maya manufactured a smile and changed the subject, asking about the upcoming fundraiser she had no intention of attending. But inside, fury built alongside determination. When the shipwreck proved valuable, when Dr. Mitchell confirmed the Saffron survived, when Maya's financial situation transformed from desperate to secure, she'd remember this moment. Remember Jennifer's practiced pity and the other mother's knowing glances. The survey team departed from Newport on a gray morning when fog made the ocean look like it extended forever. Maya stood on the dock, watching the research vessel disappear in a mist, clutching her phone like it was the only solid thing in a world that had become fluid and uncertain. Dr. Mitchell had invited her aboard, but the cost of missing 2 days of freelance work exceeded what Maya could afford. So she waited on land, checking her phone obsessively for updates that arrived in frustratingly vague increments. Wreck located. Beginning imaging survey. Initial imaging complete. Structure more intact than expected. Cargo hold identified. Evidence of sealed containers visible. Each message pushed Maya's heart rate higher, hope warring with trained pessimism. She'd learned not to trust good news, not to believe promises about better futures. But the messages kept coming, each one slightly more excited than the last. Finally, after 7 hours that felt like years, her phone rang. Dr. Mitchell's voice carried barely contained exhilaration. "Maya, we need to talk about what we found." Maya's hand tightened around her phone, the plastic case slick with nervous sweat. Dr. Mitchell's breathing came rapid through the speaker, excitement barely contained beneath professional composure. In the background, Maya could hear voices, equipment humming, the distant sound of waves against the research vessel's hull. "What did you find?" Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. Years of maintaining composure through crisis providing muscle memory her emotions couldn't access. "The cargo hold is intact. Not just intact, remarkably preserved. The ship settled in a silt bed that protected the lower decks from current damage. We used underwater imaging to map the interior, and Maya, we can see sealed copper containers. Multiple containers, arranged in the configuration described in the original manifest." Maya's knees buckled. She sat heavily on a dock bench, the wood damp from morning fog, watching fishing boats return with catches that would sell for hundreds of dollars while she processed information that might represent millions. How many containers? At least 12 visible in the imaging. Each container was designed to hold approximately 60 to 70 pounds of saffron according to period shipping standards. If even half are intact and sealed, if even a fraction of the content survived, we're looking at something extraordinary. The math spiraled through Maya's mind like vertigo. 12 containers, 60 pounds each, even if only half contained usable product. 360 pounds of 1890s cashmere saffron. At Dr. Mitchell's conservative estimate of $100,000 per pound for historical specimens, that meant $36 million. At the high end of collector market valuations, potentially triple that. What happens now? Maya heard her voice asking questions while her mind struggled to process numbers that had no relationship to her lived reality. We need to plan a recovery operation. This requires specialized equipment, submersibles with manipulator arms, preservation containers, decompression protocols for bringing sealed cargo up from depth. I'm estimating recovery costs around $200,000. The university can cover half through emergency research grants, but we'll need additional funding. The hope that had been building collapsed like sand castles under waves. Maya laughed, the sound carrying bitter recognition of patterns that had defined her life. I don't have $100,000. I don't have $10,000. I have negative $400 and a daughter who needs new shoes. Dr. Mitchell's response came without pause, as if she'd anticipated this exact objection. I know several private collectors who'd advance recovery costs in exchange for first option to purchase recovered cargo. They'd take risk, and you'd maintain control over final sale terms. It's standard practice in high-value salvage operations. What if we recover nothing? What if the containers are empty or the saffron degraded? Then the investors eat the loss. That's why they're investors. They're gambling on the 20% chance this pays off because the potential return justifies the risk. But Maya, I need you to understand something. The imaging we did today suggests those containers are sealed. Not corroded, not breached, sealed. The odds just got dramatically better than 20%. Maya ended the call with promises to review investor agreements Dr. Mitchell would send by evening. She sat on the dock bench as fog lifted and afternoon sun transformed the ocean from threatening gray to deceptive blue, trying to integrate two irreconcilable realities. The one where she couldn't afford Lily's birthday aquarium trip, and the one where she potentially owned cargo worth more than she could earn in 10 lifetimes. The investor agreements arrived via email at 7 p.m., just as Maya was heating canned soup for dinner, the third night in a row because groceries wouldn't stretch to anything more substantial. She read through dense legal language while Lily did spelling homework at the card table, each contract carefully crafted to protect investor interests while preserving Maya's ultimate ownership rights. The terms were straightforward enough that even her limited legal comprehension could grasp the fundamentals. 3 private collectors would each contribute $35,000 toward recovery costs, $105,000 total. In exchange, they'd receive first option to purchase any recovered saffron at market rates, with a 10% premium added to compensate for risk. If nothing was recovered, Maya owed nothing. If cargo proved valuable, she'd repay the $105,000 from first sales, then control remaining inventory. She called David Torres, reading in the contracts word by word, asking for translation of clauses that felt deliberately obfuscated. He listened patiently, asking clarifying questions, finally delivering his assessment with characteristic directness. The terms are actually quite favorable given your position. You're risking nothing except opportunity cost. They're risking real money on what's essentially a sophisticated lottery ticket. My only concern is the 10% premium on first option purchases. If the cargo proves extremely valuable, that premium could cost you significant money. Maya did quick math, calculating 10% of various scenarios. If the saffron sold for $50 million total, the premium meant an extra $5 million to investors. Money she'd never have anyway without their capital. That seems fair considering they're funding everything. Fair and smart are different things. But yes, under your current circumstances, this is probably your best option. Sign it. Take the gamble. She signed electronically, each digital signature feeling like stepping off a cliff while blindfolded. Within hours, Dr. Mitchell confirmed receipt and began coordinating the recovery operation. Timeline: for weeks. Equipment rental, crew assembly, weather window evaluation. For weeks until Maya would know whether her grandmother's investment had been prescient or pointless. The month passed in a purgatory of waiting punctuated by financial crises that felt simultaneously crushing and absurd. The car's transmission began slipping, repair estimates ranging from $1,800 to $3,000. The landlord sent a notice about missed rent, threatening eviction proceedings if payment wasn't received within 7 days. Lily came home with a permission slip for a class field trip that cost $35 per student, watching her mother's face carefully before asking if they could afford it. Maya juggled with desperate creativity. She borrowed $500 from David against future salvage proceeds, knowing the request was presumptuous but having no alternative. She negotiated another payment extension with the landlord, leveraging 2 years of on-time payments against 1 month's delay. She told Lily yes to the field trip, then skipped lunch for a week to make the budget balance. And through it all, she told no one about the shipwreck except those already involved. Superstition and learned caution kept her silent. She'd lived through too many false hopes. Marcus promising to be better, jobs that seemed certain until they weren't, opportunities that evaporated before manifesting. Speaking about potential success felt like inviting disaster. The recovery operation launched on a Tuesday morning when weather forecasts predicted 3 days of calm seas. Dr. Mitchell called from the research vessel at 6 a.m., her voice carrying caffeinated energy and scientific excitement. We're beginning descent operations within the hour. I'll send updates as we progress. This is going to be a long day, possibly multiple days. Try not to obsess over your phone. Maya promised nothing, knowing she'd spend every conscious moment checking for messages. She dropped Lily at school, then drove to the Newport Harbor, unable to stay away despite having no functional role in the operation. She sat in her car watching the ocean, phone clutched in her lap, waiting for news that would determine whether her life changed or continued its familiar pattern of struggle. The first container came up at 2 p.m. Dr. Mitchell's text arrived with an attached photo that made Maya's vision tunnel. The copper container, green with patina but structurally intact, sat on the research vessel's deck. Approximately 2 feet long, 18 inches in diameter, sealed with bolts that had fused over 133 years of immersion. But sealed, unquestionably sealed. Opening now. Pray with me. Maya sat in her car, strangers walking past on the harbor boardwalk, gulls crying overhead, her phone displaying an image that represented either salvation or another disappointment. She thought about her grandmother Lin Wei, who'd purchased this salvage claim in 1987 with money she probably couldn't afford to spend, who'd held this certificate until her death, never knowing whether it held value, who'd passed it to Maya like a lottery ticket or a lesson or perhaps both. The next text arrived after 15 minutes that felt like hours. Maya. The Saffron survived. Not degraded, not damaged, survived. We're looking at threads that appear nearly pristine. The copper container maintained a near-perfect seal. This is unprecedented. Maya's hands shook so violently, she nearly dropped her phone. She called immediately, unable to wait for text updates, needing to hear confirmation in Dr. Mitchell's voice. It's real, the archaeologist said without preamble. We opened the first container 30 minutes ago. The saffron inside was packed in silk cloth, layered with what appears to be mineral desiccants. The preservation is extraordinary. We're seeing deep red threads with the characteristic aroma still present. I've been studying maritime cargo recovery for 20 years, and I've never seen organic material in this condition after a century underwater. How much was in that container? Approximately 68 pounds. At current market rates for high-quality saffron, that's $340,000. But Maya, this isn't regular saffron. This is historical Kashmir saffron from the 1890s. The premium for collectors, museums, pharmaceutical researchers will be exponentially higher. Maya's throat closed. $340,000 from one container, and they'd identified 12. Even if half proved damaged, even if conservative estimates applied, she was looking at millions. Multiple millions. The number refused to integrate with her reality of $35 field trip permission slips and skipped lunches. We're bringing up the second container now, Dr. Mitchell continued. Based on similar positioning and condition, I'm optimistic about consistent results. Maya, I need you to start thinking about security, storage, authentication, sales strategy. What we're recovering isn't just cargo. It's one of the most significant historical spice finds in maritime archaeology. The value extends beyond commodity pricing into historical preservation and scientific research. They brought up 6 containers that first day, each one sealed, each one containing saffron that had survived 133 years at the bottom of the ocean through some miracle of copper craftsmanship and favorable sill conditions. By sunset, 410 pounds of 1890s cashmere saffron sat in preservation containers aboard the research vessel, representing cargo that had waited longer than Maya had been alive to be claimed. Dr. Mitchell arranged immediate transport to a climate-controlled facility at Oregon State, where the saffron would undergo formal authentication and preservation assessment. She also contacted 3 prominent auction houses specializing in historical artifacts, requesting preliminary valuations based on photographic evidence and provenance documentation. The responses arrived within 24 hours, each one carrying estimates that made Maya's hands shake. Sotheby's. Initial assessment suggests auction value between $800 and $1,200 per ounce for historical specimens. Total cargo value estimated at $5.20 to $7.80 million, not accounting for premium bidding that items of this rarity typically generate. Christie's. Unprecedented find. Comparable historical spice specimens have sold for $1,500 to $2,000 per ounce to private collectors and institutions. Recommend reserve price of $8 million with expectations of exceeding $10 million at auction. Heritage auctions, pharmaceutical and luxury food markets should be considered alongside collector markets. Several companies specialize in high-end historical ingredients for ultra-luxury products. Combined market approach could yield $12 to $15 million depending on sales strategy. Maya sat in her car outside Lily's school, reading valuations that range from life-changing to generational wealth, unable to process numbers that had no connection to anything she'd ever experienced. She thought about the $35 field trip permission slip she'd agonized over for 3 days, about the transmission repair she couldn't afford, about the eviction notice that had arrived yesterday, giving her until Friday to pay $2,900 in back rent and fees. Her phone rang. David Torres, his voice carrying excitement she'd never heard from him. Maya, Dr. Mitchell called me. She wanted my opinion on security protocols for the cargo. She told me what you found. Holy shit, Maya. Holy shit. I don't know what to do. The confession came out small, overwhelmed. This is too big. I don't know how to handle something this valuable. You hire people who do. Lawyers, accountants, security consultants, auction specialists. You build a team because you can't do this alone. And Maya, you need to do it fast. Word will spread about this find, and when it does, every opportunist and con artist within 1,000 miles will target you. The warning landed with weight Maya recognized from experience. She'd watched Marcus's friends circle after the divorce, offering help that turned out to be fishing expeditions for information about settlement terms. She'd dealt with debt collectors who used sympathy as leverage, repair shops that inflated estimates for single mothers they assumed wouldn't question charges. Dr. Mitchell helped coordinate the team, leveraging university connections to identify reputable specialists. Within a week, Maya had retained a maritime attorney who specialized in salvage claims, a financial advisor who worked with sudden wealth clients, and a security company that handled high-value artifact transport. The authentication process took 3 weeks. Experts from museums, universities, and commodity markets examined the saffron using techniques that sounded like science fiction. Gas chromatography to analyze chemical composition, radiocarbon dating to confirm age, DNA analysis comparing samples to modern cashmere saffron to verify origin, microscopic examination of thread structure to assess preservation quality. The final authentication report arrived as a bound document that read like a love letter from science to history. The recovered saffron represents an extraordinary example of preservation under maritime conditions. Chemical analysis confirms the specimens retain 87 to 92% of the volatile compounds present in fresh saffron, including safranal and crocin at levels consistent with premium-grade Kashmir saffron. This preservation level is unprecedented for organic material recovered from 19th-century shipwrecks. Radiocarbon dating confirms the specimens originated between 1880 and 1895, consistent with the vessel's documented sinking in 1891. DNA analysis matches the genetic profile of Crocus sativus cultivated in Kashmir during the Victorian era, a strain that has since evolved, making these specimens unique representatives of historical cultivation methods. Commercial value is estimated between $800 and $2,000 per ounce, depending on market sector, with potential for premium pricing from collectors and researchers. Total estimated value for 410 pounds of authenticated historical saffron, $5.2 million to $13.1 million. Maya read the report in her apartment while Lily slept, the girls breathing steady in the next room, completely unaware that their lives had just transformed in ways that would take years to fully comprehend. 5.2 million on the low end, 13.1 million on the high end. Numbers that felt like they belonged in movies rather than reality, describing wealth that people like Maya didn't access. The news leaked despite security protocols. Someone connected to the authentication lab spoke to a colleague who mentioned it to a maritime history blogger who published a speculative article about unprecedented saffron recovery from 1891 wreck. Within 48 hours, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets, then national maritime publications, then mainstream media fascinated by the combination of historical significance and enormous value. Single mother inherits grandmother's shipwreck, discovers $10 million in antique saffron, ran the headline in the Portland Tribune. The article included Maya's name, Lily's first name, enough identifying details that people from every corner of Maya's life could connect the story to her identity. Her phone exploded with messages. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly remembering close connections. Marcus's lawyer calling about reassessing child support arrangements given changed financial circumstances. Jennifer Morrison leaving voicemail about exciting opportunities for you to give back to the school community. Distant relatives she'd met twice introducing themselves as family who's always supported you. The attention felt simultaneously validating and violating. Maya had spent 6 years in relative obscurity, struggling silently, while people like Jennifer Morrison judged from comfortable distance. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted connection, wanted proximity to wealth they assumed Maya would share. David called with warning in his voice. Turn off your phone. Stop answering messages from anyone you don't know personally. Maya, you're about to experience a level of attention that will be overwhelming. People are going to come out of everywhere claiming they deserve a piece of this. You need boundaries immediately. Marcus appeared at her apartment the following evening, his expensive car incongruous in the parking lot where Maya's failing Honda leaked transmission fluid. He knocked with the particular confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to enter spaces, even ones he'd abandoned years earlier. Maya opened the door but didn't invite him in, standing in the threshold like a barrier between her ex-husband and the life she'd built without him. Maya, I heard about your inheritance. That's incredible. I'm happy for you. The words came smooth, practiced, carrying none of the sincerity they pretended to convey. Maya recognized the tone from their marriage. From countless times Marcus had manufactured emotions that serve his interests. What do you want, Marcus? I wanted to discuss Lily's future. Obviously, with your new financial situation, we should revisit custody arrangements. I'm prepared to increase my involvement, maybe move to shared custody 50-50. She deserves to have both parents fully present in her life. Maya's laugh came sharp enough to make Marcus flinch. You want custody now, after 6 years of minimum child support and cancel visitations. After telling her something came up so many times she stopped getting excited about weekends with you. Now that there's money involved, suddenly you're ready to be a father. Marcus's expression shifted, false warmth replaced by calculation. I'm thinking about Lily's welfare. A child's relationship with both parents is critical. I'm sure a family court would agree, especially given the dramatic change in your circumstances. Judges look favorably on fathers who step up when mothers come into significant wealth. The threat landed exactly as Marcus intended. He was proposing increased involvement while simultaneously suggesting legal challenges if Maya refused. The subtext was clear. Give me access to your daughter, and by extension your money, or I'll make you fight for custody you've maintained alone for 6 years. Get off my property. If you want to discuss custody, have your lawyer contact mine. And Marcus, I do have a lawyer now. A very good one who specializes in protecting sudden wealth clients from opportunistic family members. She closed the door on his protests, hands shaking with fury and residual fear. David's warning about opportunists had manifested with brutal speed, proving that money attracted predators faster than blood attracted sharks. The security company she'd retained suggested relocating temporarily while sale arrangements finalized. The attention had made Maya's address public, and her ground-floor apartment with its failing locks presented security risks that weren't hypothetical. They arranged a short-term rental in a gated community 40 minutes away, covering costs from the advance one of the auction houses had provided against future sale proceeds. Packing happened with surreal speed. Maya loaded their limited possessions into boxes, marveling at how little they owned even after 8 years of accumulation. Lily watched with wide eyes, understanding something fundamental was changing, but not fully grasping the scope. Are we moving because of the treasure ship? The girl's question cut through Maya's distraction. Yes, baby. We're moving somewhere safer while I finish selling what we found. Then we'll find a permanent home. A real home, that's ours. With a yard? And maybe a dog. The requests were so modest, so achingly small compared to what they could now afford, that Maya felt her chest crack open. Lily was asking for things other children took for granted: a yard, a pet, permanence. Not mansions or luxury, just normal middle-class stability. Yes, sweetheart. A yard and a dog in your own room that you can paint any color. Whatever you want. They moved to the rental on a Saturday morning when rain made everything gray and slick. The new apartment existed in a different economic reality. 2 bedrooms, updated appliances, a balcony overlooking landscaped grounds, neighbors who drove cars less than 5 years old. Maya paid 3 months in advance from the auction house advance. Watching her checking account display numbers she'd never seen outside of debt, $15,000 remaining after rent and deposit. Lily explored the new space with cautious excitement, touching surfaces like she expected them to disappear. She chose the bedroom with the window seat, already imagining how she'd arrange furniture they hadn't purchased yet. That evening, after Lily fell asleep in a real bed Maya had bought that afternoon, the first new furniture either of them had owned in years, Maya sat on the balcony staring at manicured lawns and expensive cars, trying to integrate who she'd been that morning with who she was becoming. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Mitchell. Sotheby's is proposing a dedicated auction for the Saffron collection. They're calling it the Prosperity Collection, a Victorian spice treasury. They're estimating final sale between $11 and $14 million based on pre-auction interest. Maya, collectors from 7 countries have already requested catalogs. This is going to be extraordinary. $11 to $14 million. The numbers still refuse to feel real, even as Maya sat in an apartment she'd rented with advance money, even as evidence of changed circumstances accumulated around her. She thought about her grandmother Lin Wei, who'd worked 3 jobs and saved obsessively and made an investment 37 years ago that had seemed pointless right up until it wasn't. She wished Lin Wei had lived to see this, to know that her faith in long-shot opportunities hadn't been foolish. That the salvage claim she'd held onto despite its apparent worthlessness had actually been insurance against a future she'd never witnessed, but had helped secure anyway. The following week brought a parade of specialists helping Maya navigate complexities she'd never imagined. The financial advisor, A woman named Patricia Chun, who'd built a practice around sudden wealth management, delivered harsh truths in gentle language. You're going to lose approximately 40% to taxes. Federal, state, possibly local depending on how the sale is structured. That's not negotiable, and planning for it now prevents disasters later. After taxes, recovery costs, investor repayment, and professional fees, you'll net somewhere between $5.50 and $7.5 million, depending on final sale price. The reduction from $14 million to $7 million would have devastated Maya a month ago. Now it felt like semantic distinction between unimaginable wealth and slightly less unimaginable wealth. Either way, her life had transformed beyond recognition. Patricia continued with practiced efficiency. We'll establish a trust for Lily's education and long-term security. We'll pay off all existing debt immediately. Credit cards, medical bills, any outstanding obligations. We'll create an emergency fund covering 2 years of expenses. The remaining capital gets invested conservatively with a focus on generating sustainable income rather than maximum growth. You're not trying to get richer. You're trying to stay rich, which requires different strategies. Maya listened, absorbing advice that felt simultaneously obvious and revolutionary. Pay off debt. Create safety nets. Don't spend everything immediately. The advice wasn't complicated, but it contradicted every instinct poverty had trained into her. Scarcity thinking encouraged hoarding cash, avoiding investments that might fail, spending on immediate needs because future needs were hypothetical. Patricia seemed to recognize this internal conflict. I work almost exclusively with sudden wealth clients. People who inherit, win lotteries, sell businesses. The ones who maintain wealth long-term share common behaviors. They're boring with money. They don't make dramatic purchases or invest in their friend's startup or loan large sums to family members. They live below their means, let professionals manage complexity, and resist pressure to share wealth with everyone who asks. What about people who knew me before? Friends who helped when I had nothing. Distinguish between genuine relationships and opportunistic ones. Someone like David Torres, who helped you before money entered the picture, has earned consideration. Random acquaintances who ignored you for years, but suddenly remembered deep connections have not. Trust your instincts about who deserves gratitude versus who deserves boundaries. The auction was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Time Sotheby's needed to market the collection to collectors, museums, and institutional buyers worldwide. The catalog they produced was a work of art itself. Glossy pages featuring photographs of the Saffron, historical context about the prosperity, authentication reports from multiple experts, estimated values for individual lots. Maya received a copy and spent an evening studying it, marveling at how scientific documentation and marketing language transformed salvage cargo into objects of desire. The catalog didn't just describe Saffron. It told a story about Victorian trade, maritime adventure, preservation miracles, historical authenticity. It positioned the collection as rare opportunity to own piece of 19th century commerce, to possess ingredients that had traveled from Kashmir to San Francisco before fate intervened. The marketing worked. Pre-auction bidding interest exceeded Sotheby's projections by 40%. Museums in London, Dubai, and Tokyo requested allocation of specific lots for permanent collections. Pharmaceutical companies conducting research on historical compounds bid on samples. Luxury food companies wanting to produce authentic Victorian saffron products offered premium prices for commercial-grade lots. Lily's birthday arrived during this period of waiting and preparation. Maya had promised a replacement celebration for the canceled aquarium trip, and she delivered it with the particular joy of someone who'd spent years denying her child experiences other families took for granted. They went to the aquarium, where Lily pressed against glass barriers watching jellyfish pulse and sea otters play and sharks patrol with ancient grace. They ate lunch at the aquarium restaurant without checking prices first, ordering whatever looked appealing, leaving a tip that made their servers' eyes widen. They bought souvenirs from the gift shop, stuffed animals and books, and a poster of marine life that Lily wanted for her new bedroom. Walking back to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Maya's, voice carrying contentment that made Maya's throat tighten. "This was the best birthday ever, Mom. Thank you for not giving up." The gratitude landed with weight that threatened to crack Maya's composure. She hadn't given up, but there had been moments, 3 a.m. moments, when bills exceeded income and options felt exhausted, when giving up had seemed like the only rational response to circumstances that refused to improve. She'd persisted not because she'd been confident things would get better, but because Lily deserved a mother who kept fighting even when fighting felt futile. "I'll never give up on us, baby. Never." Jennifer Morrison called 3 days before the auction, her voice carrying the particular brightness of someone attempting to repair burned bridges. "Maya, I wanted to apologize for any awkwardness at the bus stop. I'm afraid my concern came across as judgment, and that was never my intention. I'd love to take you to lunch, maybe discuss how your good fortune could benefit the school community." Maya recognized the tactic, apologized for past behavior as prelude to asking for money. She felt no anger, just tired recognition of patterns that had probably repeated throughout Jennifer's life whenever proximity to wealth created opportunity. "I appreciate the apology, Jennifer, but I'm not interested in lunch, and I'm not making donation commitments until after the auction finalizes. If you'd like to submit a formal request through the school foundation, I'll consider it alongside other charitable opportunities." The formality of Maya's response created awkward silence before Jennifer recovered. "Of course, I understand. The school would be grateful for any support you choose to provide." They ended the call with polite distance, replacing the false warmth Jennifer had attempted to project. Maya felt no satisfaction in the reversal of positions, no vindication in being courted by someone who'd previously pitted her. Mostly she felt exhausted by the constant negotiation of relationships that money had transformed from simple to transactional. The auction took place on a Tuesday evening in Sotheby's Manhattan headquarters, simultaneously broadcast online for remote bidders. Maya attended in person, sitting in the back row with Patricia and her maritime attorney, watching wealthy collectors compete for cargo that had begun its journey in Kashmir 140 years earlier. The first lot, a sealed copper container with 68 pounds of authenticated Kashmir saffron, complete with provenance documentation, opened at $400,000. The bidding climbed with mechanical efficiency: $450,000, $500,000, $550,000. Museum representatives raised paddles. Private collectors countered via phone. Online bidders pushed prices higher through screens that displayed their offers in real time. The lot sold for $1.1 million to a pharmaceutical research institute in Switzerland. Maya watched the final price appear on screens throughout the hall and felt nothing. The number was too large, too disconnected from her understanding of value, to generate emotional response beyond abstract acknowledgement that it was good. Subsequent lots followed similar patterns. Museum collections competed with private buyers. Luxury food companies bid against commodity traders. Each lot exceeded its estimated value, pushed higher by the combination of rarity, historical significance, and the particular psychology that drove auction prices beyond rational calculation when wealthy buyers decided they wanted something badly enough. By the time the final lot sold, a premium specimen lot targeted specifically at collectors willing to pay extraordinary prices for the finest examples, the total had reached $13.7 million. After Sotheby's commission, investor repayment, recovery costs, and professional fees, Maya would net approximately $7.2 million. $7.2 million. Enough to eliminate every financial concern that had defined her adult life. Enough to provide Lily with every opportunity Maya's own childhood had lacked. Enough to transform "how will we afford this" from constant anxiety to abstract consideration. Patricia squeezed Maya's hand, voice carrying satisfaction that professional success couldn't fully explain. "Congratulations. You're officially financially independent. If we invest conservatively and you live reasonably, you'll never worry about money again." They flew back to Portland the following morning, first-class tickets that Patricia had booked without consulting Maya. The seats were wide and comfortable, the the service attentive, the flight attendants treating them with deference that felt unearned. Maya sat by the window watching clouds pass beneath them, thinking about how this was now possible, flying first class on a Tuesday morning because convenience mattered more than cost. Lily pressed against the window beside her, fascinated by the view, asking questions about cloud formation and air pressure and why the sky looked different from above. Her curiosity was uncomplicated by awareness of what their lives had been weeks earlier, how dramatically circumstances had shifted, how unlikely this transformation had been. Maya had thought about the $650 she'd spent from overdraft account, the gamble she'd taken on her grandmother's legacy, the chain of decisions and circumstances and preserved saffron that had led to this moment. She thought about Marcus trying to claim credit for Lily's success, Jennifer Morrison suddenly remembering old friendships, strangers offering congratulations that felt more like positioning than genuine happiness. But mostly she thought about Lin Wei, who'd bought a quarter share in a sunken ship when she probably couldn't afford it, who'd held that salvage claim for 37 years without knowing if it meant anything, who'd passed it to Maya as inheritance or lesson or faith in possibilities that seemed impossible right up until they weren't. The plane descended through clouds toward Portland, the city sprawling below them. Somewhere down there an apartment they'd fled, and a new rental that felt temporary despite 3 months paid in advance. Soon they'd shop for a permanent home, something with the yard and space Lily had requested. Soon Maya would establish routines that didn't involve constant financial calculation. Soon she'd learn to navigate wealth with the same competence she'd developed navigating poverty. But for now, descending through clouds with her daughter pressed against the window, Maya allowed herself to simply sit with the transformation, to acknowledge that sometimes impossible things happened, that long shots occasionally paid off, that the difference between disaster and salvation could be as arbitrary as sealed copper containers surviving 133 years underwater. The plane touched down with gentle precision, wheels meeting runway, bringing them back to ground where their new life waited to be built from the foundation of grandmother's faith and Victorian-era saffron, and the stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up seemed like the only rational choice. The house hunting began 3 weeks after the auction settled, after wire transfers cleared, and Patricia confirmed that Maya's accounts now held numbers that still felt fictional despite their documented reality. Patricia had been insistent about waiting, about letting the initial shock metabolize before making permanent decisions that sudden wealth encouraged people to rush. "You have time now," Patricia had said during their post-auction meeting. "That's the gift money provides. Time to think, time to plan, time to make choices based on what you actually want rather than what circumstances force you to accept. Don't waste that gift by hurrying into decisions you'll regret." Maya had taken the advice seriously, spending those 3 weeks in the rental apartment, watching Lily settle into routines that didn't involve constant moves or financial crisis. The girl had started at a new school closer to their temporary home, one where the other children came from families who didn't worry about field trip costs or school supply lists. Lily had made friends quickly, her natural warmth finding receptive audience among kids who hadn't yet learned to judge based on economic indicators. But the rental felt temporary in ways that went beyond lease terms. It was a placeholder, a bridge between the life they'd fled and the life they were building. Maya wanted permanence, wanted Lily to have a bedroom she could paint knowing they'd stay long enough to see the paint fade, wanted a home that represented choice rather than necessity. The real estate agent Patricia recommended was a woman named Sandra Kim who specialized in working with sudden wealth clients. She understood the particular psychology of people who'd gone from counting pennies to having millions, the guilt about spending, the fear that money would disappear as quickly as it had arrived, the difficulty calibrating what reasonable meant when your entire understanding of value had been reconstructed. Sandra took Maya through a dozen properties over 2 weeks, each viewing a lesson in what money could buy and what Maya actually wanted. There were mansions that felt like museums, sterile showpieces designed to impress rather than shelter. There were trendy modern constructions with open floor plans and smart home technology that made Maya feel like she was living inside someone else's Instagram fantasy. There were historic homes with character and charm, but maintenance requirements that would consume time Maya wanted to spend with Lily. "What do you actually want?" Sandra asked after the 10th property left Maya feeling overwhelmed rather than excited. "Not what you think you should want, not what seems appropriate for someone with your net worth. What would make you happy?" Maya thought about the question seriously, pushing past years of training that had taught her to want practical things, cheap things, things that wouldn't burden budgets that were always stretched too thin. What did she want when want wasn't constrained by possibility? "I want space. Not ostentatious space, but enough that Lily and I don't feel like we're living on top of each other. I want a yard where she can have that dog we promised her. I want a neighborhood with kids her age, but not somewhere so exclusive that she grows up thinking wealth is normal. I want a place that feels like it could hold memories, not just serve as an address." Sandra nodded like Maya had finally said something useful. "I know a property. It's not flashy, which is why I haven't shown it to you yet. Most sudden wealth clients want statement homes. But this might be exactly what you need." The house sat on a corner lot in an established Portland neighborhood where mature trees lined the streets, and the home showed decades of accumulated character. It was a craftsman-style bungalow, built in 1924 according to the listing, with a wide front porch, dormers, and the kind of architectural detail that came from an era when houses were built by people who cared about longevity rather than quarterly profits. The interior had been updated thoughtfully: modernized kitchen and bathrooms, refinished hardwood floors, new windows that maintained period aesthetics while providing contemporary efficiency. But the bones were original, the craftsmanship evident in details like built-in bookshelves and a brick fireplace and door frames that had been hand-carved nearly a century earlier. The backyard was exactly what Maya had imagined when she'd promised Lily they could have space. A third of an acre, fenced, with mature trees providing shade and a shed that could serve as storage or play space. Room for a dog to run, for a garden if Maya decided to try growing things, for Lily to have friends over without feeling cramped. "The price is $680,000, Sandra said as they walked through for the second time. Maya already imagining where furniture would go, how Lily's laugh would sound echoing off these walls. "That's actually below market for this neighborhood. But the sellers are motivated. They've already purchased their next home and want to close quickly. $680,000. 3 months ago, the number would have been incomprehensible, representing more than Maya could earn in 15 years of full-time work at decent wages. Now it felt almost modest, less than 10% of her post-tax auction proceeds, a purchase that wouldn't even require a mortgage if she chose to pay cash. "I want it," Maya said, the decision settling into place with the same certainty that had driven her to spend $650 on a shipwreck she'd never seen. "Is that impulsive? Should I look at more properties?" Sandra smiled with the satisfaction of an agent who'd correctly read her client. "Sometimes you know, and this isn't impulsive. You've looked at a dozen properties, you know what you don't want, and this checks all your boxes. Let's write an offer." They closed 30 days later, the transaction moving with the smooth efficiency that cash purchases enabled. Maya signed papers at a title company office, watched the wire transfer deplete her checking account by $680,000, and received keys to property that legally belonged to her without lien or encumbrance or landlord who could decide their lease wouldn't be renewed. She drove directly to Lily's school, arriving early for pickup, waiting by the curb with keys clutched in her hand like talismans. When Lily emerged, backpack bouncing against her shoulders, face lighting up at the sight of her mother's car, Maya felt emotion well up so intense it threatened to overwhelm her composure. "Get in, baby. We're going to see our new house." Lily's eyes went wide with the particular excitement of children receiving news they'd been hoping for, but not quite believing would materialize. "Our real house. The one we're keeping. The one we're keeping forever if we want. The one with the yard and the space for a dog and your own room that you can paint any color without asking permission." They drove through streets that would become familiar, Maya pointing out landmarks. The park 3 blocks away, the library, the ice cream shop that apparently made the best mint chocolate chip in Portland. When they pulled into the driveway of the Craftsman bungalow, Lily's gasp was pure vindication for every choice Maya had made. "Mom, it's perfect. It looks like houses and books, like something families live in who don't have to worry about things. The observation landed with weight that Maya felt in her chest. Lily had internalized their financial struggles despite Maya's efforts to shield her, had developed an understanding that worry was normal, that stability was something other families experienced. Now, walking through the front door into a house that belonged to them, Lily was encountering a different reality. They explored room by room, Lily claiming the bedroom with a window seat and built-in bookshelves, already planning where her bed would go, where she'd put the desk Maya had promised to buy her. She raced through the backyard, measuring it with her child's stride, declaring it perfect for the dog they'd visit the shelter to adopt that weekend. Maya stood on the back porch watching her daughter play, thinking about the apartment they'd fled, the succession of rentals and temporary places that had defined Lily's childhood. This house represented permanence in ways that transcended property ownership. It represented the promise that their lives had stabilized, that crisis had been replaced by security, that Lily could grow up without learning to pack light in case they had to move quickly. That evening, after they'd returned to the rental to pack their limited belongings, Maya's phone rang with a call from a number she didn't recognize, but a Portland area code suggested local origin. She answered cautiously, prepared for another opportunistic pitch from someone who'd heard about her auction success. The voice on the other end was female, older, carrying the particular weariness of someone who'd spent decades fighting battles that never quite ended. "Miss Chen, my name is Catherine Rodriguez. I run the Sunshine Harbor Women's Shelter here in Portland. I'm calling because I heard about your inheritance, and I wanted to reach out about something that might interest you." Maya's guard went up automatically. The pitch was coming, the request for donation disguised as opportunity. "I'm not making charitable commitments right now. If you'd like to submit a formal request." "This isn't a donation request," Catherine interrupted, her voice carrying sincerity that cut through Maya's defensive posture. "Or at least, not a typical one. I'm calling because your story resonated with me. Single mother, financial crisis, fighting to keep your daughter while everything seemed stacked against you. That's the story of half the women who come through our shelter." Maya's throat tightened with recognition. She knew those stories intimately, had lived them, had come within days of becoming one of the women who needed shelter services because rent exceeded income and eviction notices arrived with mathematical precision. Catherine continued, her pitch practiced but authentic. "Our shelter serves 40 women and their children at full capacity. We provide temporary housing, job training, childcare, legal advocacy, all the services that make the difference between women escaping poverty and women cycling through it indefinitely. But our facility is old, cramped, and fundamentally inadequate. We run on grants and donations that barely cover operating costs, let alone facility improvements. What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing a partnership. Your financial support could fund a complete facility renovation, or, if you were interested in something more ambitious, construction of a new shelter designed specifically for the needs we've identified through decades of service. In exchange, you'd have input on design, programs, the approach we take. You understand what these women need because you are almost one of them." The proposal hung in the air while Maya processed implications that spiraled beyond simple charity. This wasn't writing a check and feeling good about generosity. This was active involvement in creating something that served people whose circumstances she intimately understood. "How much would a new facility cost?" "We've done preliminary planning. A purpose-built shelter serving 80 women and children, with dedicated spaces for childcare, job training, counseling, and transitional housing would cost approximately $4.2 million, including land acquisition. That's beyond what we could raise through traditional channels in any reasonable timeline. But for someone with your resources, it's achievable. $4.2 million. Maya did quick mental math against her post-tax net worth. It would consume more than half her liquid assets, would require the kind of financial commitment Patricia had specifically warned against in their early meetings. Don't give away money in the first year. Don't make major charitable commitments while you're still processing the psychological impact of sudden wealth. Wait until emotions stabilize and you can make rational decisions. But this didn't feel like emotional reaction. It felt like recognition of obligation. Maya had escaped poverty through luck. Her grandmother's salvage claim, sealed copper containers, 133 years of preservation. Other women fought the same battles without lucky inheritances, without shipwrecks waiting to transform their circumstances. They needed systematic support, not lottery tickets. I want to visit your current facility. I want to meet the women you serve, understand the programs, see what actually helps versus what sounds good in grant applications. If what I see matches what you're describing, I'll fund the new shelter. Catherine's pause carried surprise, poorly disguised. You'd commit to $4.2 million based on one site visit. I commit to creating something that actually works. The dollar amount is secondary to the impact. If you're doing real work that changes outcomes, I want to support it. If you're running a well-intentioned operation that doesn't actually move women from crisis to stability, I'll pass. They scheduled the visit for the following week. Maya brought Patricia, wanting professional assessment of the organization's financial health and operational efficiency. They spent 6 hours at Sunshine Harbor, touring cramped facilities that had been built in the 1970s and minimally updated since, meeting women whose stories carried variations on themes Maya recognized from her own life. There was Jennifer, 28, who'd left an abusive marriage with 2 children and nothing else, living in a shelter while working 2 part-time jobs and attending night school for a dental hygiene certification that might provide income sufficient to support independent housing. There was Maria, 35, whose husband's death from cancer had left her with medical debt that forced her into bankruptcy and homelessness, now rebuilding while her 3 children attended school from a shelter address that made other parents whisper. There was Keisha, 42, who'd been laid off from a manufacturing job that didn't exist anymore, who'd lost her apartment when unemployment ran out, who was learning computer skills that might make her employable in an economy that had moved on without her. Each story was different in details, but identical in structure. Circumstances beyond individual control, abuse, medical crisis, economic displacement, had pushed women into poverty. The shelter provided bridge between crisis and stability, but the bridge was overcrowded, underfunded, and inadequate to the scope of need it attempted to address. Catherine walked Maya through program outcomes with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to present data to skeptical donors. 73% of women who complete our full program achieve stable housing within 6 months. 86% remain stably housed 2 years out. Those are exceptional outcomes compared to national averages. But we turn away 5 families for everyone we can serve because we don't have capacity. The need is exponentially larger than our resources. Maya looked at facilities that reminded her of the group homes and temporary housing she'd narrowly avoided, saw her own potential history reflected in the women who navigated this space with dignity despite circumstances designed to strip dignity away. She thought about Lily, who'd come within weeks of living somewhere like this, whose stability had depended on sealed copper containers that might easily have corroded or been empty. Patricia pulled Maya aside during a break in the tour, voice low enough that others wouldn't overhear. Their financials are solid. They run lean, minimal administrative overhead, good outcomes documentation. If you're serious about this, they're a legitimate organization that would use your money effectively. But Maya, this is a substantial commitment. More than half your liquid net worth. You need to be certain. I'm certain. These could have been us. If the shipwreck had been empty, if the Saffron had degraded, if my grandmother hadn't filed its salvage claim, we'd have ended up here or somewhere worse. I got lucky. I want to build something for women who don't get lucky. The commitment came in stages, structured by attorneys and financial advisors who insisted on due diligence despite Maya's emotional certainty. She established a foundation, the Maya Chen Foundation, named for the grandmother whose faith in unlikely investments had made everything possible. The foundation's mission was specific, providing comprehensive support services for single mothers experiencing financial crisis, with focus on transitional housing, job training, and wraparound services that address the systemic barriers keeping women in poverty. The new Sunshine Harbor facility became the foundation's first major project. Maya worked with architects who specialized in trauma-informed design, creating spaces that felt safe rather than institutional, that provided privacy while enabling community, that acknowledged the dignity of women whose circumstances had temporarily stripped away their housing security. The design included private family suites instead of dormitory-style sleeping areas, so mothers could maintain parental authority and children could have bedrooms that felt like bedrooms rather than shelter spaces. There were dedicated playrooms designed by child development specialists, ensuring kids didn't lose their childhoods to their mother's financial crises. There were computer labs and training spaces and a commercial kitchen where women could learn culinary skills while preparing meals for the community. Most importantly, there were transitional apartments on the upper floors, fully furnished units where women who'd completed the program could live for up to 2 years at subsidized rent while building savings and establishing employment history that would qualify them for traditional housing. The project took 18 months from groundbreaking to completion. Maya attended every monthly progress meeting, reviewing budgets and timelines and design modifications with the focused attention she'd once applied to stretching grocery money across 2 weeks. She brought Lily to the construction site periodically, wanting her daughter to understand where their money was going, why it mattered, how their good fortune was being converted into systematic change. Lily absorbed the lessons with the uncomplicated morality of childhood. We're building a place for moms and kids who need help, like we needed help before great-grandma's ship. Exactly right, baby. We got lucky. Not everyone gets lucky. So we're building something that helps when luck doesn't. The grand opening took place on a Saturday morning when Portland's weather cooperated with rare November sunshine. Local officials attended, delivering speeches about community support and compassion that rang hollow to Maya, who knew most of those officials had overseen systems that failed women like her daily. But their presence helped legitimize the facility, attracted media coverage that would help with future fundraising. Catherine spoke with the earned authority of someone who'd spent decades in the trenches. This facility represents a new model for supporting women in transition. Not charity that keeps people dependent, but comprehensive support that enables independence. Maya Chen didn't just write a check. She built something that will change lives for generations. Maya took the podium reluctantly, uncomfortable with public recognition despite understanding its necessity for the foundation's future work. She kept her remarks brief, focusing on her grandmother rather than herself. Maya Chen immigrated to America with nothing but determination and faith that hard work would be rewarded. She worked 3 jobs, saved obsessively, made investments that seemed foolish to everyone around her. One of those investments was a salvage claim to a sunken ship that sat at the bottom of the ocean for 37 years before proving valuable. She didn't live to see that investment pay off, but her faith in unlikely possibilities made everything you see here today possible. This building honors her memory by supporting women who need faith when circumstances offer none. The first families moved in that afternoon. Maya watched women carry their belongings into private suites, saw children claim bedrooms with the tentative hope of kids who'd learned not to trust that good things would last. She thought about how easily she and Lily could have been among them, how arbitrary the difference between their outcomes had been. Jennifer Morrison appeared at the reception following the ribbon cutting, her presence surprising given their strained history. She approached Maya with visible discomfort, the easy confidence from their bus stop interactions replaced by something that might have been genuine humility. Maya, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the performative version I offered when I heard about your auction success. I judged you harshly when you were struggling, made assumptions about your choices, treated you like someone to pity rather than someone to respect. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Maya studied Jennifer's face, searching for calculation or strategy, finding what appeared to be authentic regret. Why are you telling me this now? Because I watched you build this facility instead of buying a mansion. I watched you convert sudden wealth into systematic support for women everyone else ignores. It made me realize how badly I misread you. You weren't someone who needed my charity. You were someone fighting battles I never had to face, and I treated that like moral failing rather than recognizing it as strength. The apology landed with weight that complicated Maya's earlier resentment. Jennifer had been cruel, but her cruelty had stemmed from ignorance rather than malice, from comfort that bred inability to imagine circumstances different from her own. She was trying to learn to acknowledge error, to repair damage in ways that felt genuine. I appreciate the apology. And Jennifer, if you want to actually help rather than just feeling better about past behavior, the foundation always needs volunteers. We need women who can mentor, who can share professional networks, who can help shelter residents navigate systems designed to exclude them. That's more valuable than apologies. Jennifer nodded, accepting the implicit challenge. I'd like that. I'll contact Catherine about volunteer opportunities. Marcus appeared 3 months after the shelter opening, his lawyer having finally accepted that increased custody requests based on Maya's wealth would fail in family court. He came to the house unannounced, standing on the porch of the Craftsman bungalow, like a salesman who'd lost confidence in his pitch. Maya, the house looks great. You've done well for yourself. Maya didn't invite him in, standing in the doorway as barrier between her ex-husband and the life she'd built. What do you want, Marcus? I wanted to apologize for how I handled things after the divorce, for not being more present for Lily, for coming at you with lawyers when I should have just talked. I was angry about the divorce, took it out on you and Lily, and that wasn't fair. The apology sounded rehearsed, calculated to achieve objectives Maya couldn't yet identify. Is this leading somewhere? Marcus had the grace to look embarrassed. I'd like to be more involved in Lily's life. Not for financial reasons. I understand that ship has sailed. But because she's my daughter, and I've been a terrible father, and I'd like to try being better. Maya felt no triumph in his admission, just tired recognition of patterns she'd watched repeat throughout their marriage. Marcus wanted things when they became unavailable, lost interest when they were granted. He'd wanted custody when Maya had money, now claimed to want fatherhood now that custody was uncontested. Lily deserves a father who shows up consistently, not someone who engages when it's convenient and disappears when it's not. If you're serious about being present, start small. Weekly dinners, no cancellations, no something came up excuses. Prove you can maintain basic consistency before asking for more access. Marcus agreed, and to Maya's surprise, followed through. Weekly dinners became routine, his presence tentative but consistent. Lily remained cautiously optimistic, protective of hope that her father might actually become someone reliable. Maya watched from distance, prepared to intervene if Marcus reverted to old patterns, but allowing space for possibility that people could change when consequences finally penetrated their self-regard. The foundation's work expanded through that first year and into the second. Maya hired staff, established programs, partnered with other organizations addressing poverty's systemic causes. She learned that solving problems required more than money. It required listening to people, experiencing those problems, building solutions that addressed actual needs rather than donors' assumptions about needs. She learned that some women needed job training, while others needed mental health support, while others needed simply time and space to recover from trauma before they could engage with employment or housing planning. She learned that children experiencing housing instability required specialized educational support, that traditional schools weren't designed for kids whose addresses changed frequently and whose parents worked multiple jobs. Most importantly, she learned that her experience, nearly becoming homeless despite working hard and making responsible choices, wasn't aberrant. It was common, normal, the result of an economic system that punished bad luck more severely than it rewarded good work. The women she served weren't fundamentally different from her. They just had different luck. Patricia helped Maya manage the foundation's finances with the same rigor she applied to personal wealth management. You started with $7.2 million post-tax. After the house, the shelter construction, first-year foundation operations, and living expenses, you're at $1.8 million in liquid assets plus the house. That's still substantial wealth, but you're spending capital faster than investment returns can replenish. If you want the foundation to continue beyond 5 years, you need to transition from capital spending to endowment building. Maya understood the warning. She'd been operating in crisis mode, deploying resources to address immediate needs without building sustainable funding infrastructure. That approach worked initially, but couldn't continue indefinitely without exhausting her wealth. They restructured the foundation's funding model, establishing an endowment that would generate sustainable income for operations while preserving capital. Maya committed $1 million to the endowment, then focused on building donor networks that could supplement investment returns with ongoing contributions from people who shared her commitment to addressing family homelessness. The work was harder than she'd anticipated, requiring skills she didn't have: fundraising, public speaking, board management, program evaluation. She hired people who had those skills, learning to delegate instead of attempting to personally manage every aspect of the foundation's operations. The transition from doing everything herself to trusting others felt uncomfortable, counter to instincts poverty had trained into her, but necessary for building something that would outlast her personal involvement. Lily thrived through these changes, growing from the tentative 8-year-old who'd asked about aquarium trips to a confident 11-year-old who volunteered at the shelter on weekends, reading to younger children and helping with homework. She'd adopted the Promised Dog, a rescue named Pepper who'd been found abandoned and neglected, who bonded with Lily through shared understanding of what it meant to be given a second chance. The girl still asked thoughtful questions that revealed how deeply she'd internalized their previous poverty. "Mom, why do some families have so much money when other families don't have enough? It doesn't seem fair." Maya sat with the question seriously, respecting Lily's moral intuition while trying to provide honest context. "It's not fair. Some of it's luck, like us and great-grandma's shipwreck. Some of it's systems that weren't designed to be fair, that give advantages to people who already have resources and make it harder for people starting with less. That's why we're building things like the shelter, trying to make the unfairness a little less overwhelming for families who got unlucky. When I grow up, I want to help fix the unfair parts. Then we'll have Raised You Right, baby." The third anniversary of the auction approached with a particular weight of milestones that marked before and after. 3 years since Maya had sat in her old apartment staring at bills she couldn't pay, phone displaying $287.43 in checking, future feeling like narrowing tunnel toward inevitable crisis. 3 years since she'd gambled $650 on a shipwreck her grandmother had believed in for 37 years. She invited David Torres and Dr. Sarah Mitchell to dinner at the house, wanting to thank the people whose expertise had transformed legal documents into actual wealth. David brought his girlfriend, a marine biologist he'd met on a research expedition. Sarah brought her wife and stories about academic papers that had resulted from the prosperity salvage, research that was advancing understanding of historical preservation methods and maritime cargo recovery. They ate in the dining room, light from the Craftsman fixtures casting warm glow across a table that had been set with care rather than urgency. Food prepared because Maya wanted to cook rather than because cooking was cheapest option. The conversation flowed easily, moving from shipwreck stories to foundation work to the comfortable topics people who'd shared improbable journey discussed when they gathered to acknowledge how far they traveled. "You should know," Sarah said during dessert, "the prosperity salvage is being used as case study in maritime archaeology programs worldwide. The preservation protocols we developed, the authentication methods, the way we balanced commercial and academic interests, it's changing how the field approaches historical cargo recovery. Your grandmother's investment didn't just change your life. It advanced an entire discipline." Maya felt emotion well up unexpected. She thought about Lin Wei, who'd worked 3 jobs and saved obsessively and bought a quarter share in a shipwreck that must have seemed ridiculous to everyone who knew about it. Who'd held that salvage claim through 37 years of doubt, through her son's death, through every circumstance that might have persuaded someone less stubborn to abandon foolish investments. She would have loved knowing that. Lin Wei believed in long-term thinking, in planting trees whose shade she'd never sit in. Knowing her investment advanced knowledge beyond just making money, she would have been so proud. David raised his glass in toast to Lin Wei Chun, who bought a shipwreck and changed everything. They drank to memory, to luck, to the intersection of preparation and opportunity that sometimes transformed impossible hopes into documented reality. Maya looked around her table at people who'd been strangers 3 years earlier, who'd become friends through shared work and mutual respect, who'd helped her navigate transformation from poverty to wealth without losing herself in the process. Later, after guests had departed and Lily had gone to bed, Maya sat on the back porch watching Pepper patrol the yard, nose investigating scents that carried meaning only dogs could interpret. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the divorces, the poverty, the bills that exceeded income, the moment she'd chosen to spend $650 she couldn't afford on salvage claim that might have been worthless. She thought about the women at Sunshine Harbor, who were living the life she might have lived if copper containers had corroded or Saffron had degraded or her grandmother had never filed that salvage claim. She thought about systemic change versus lucky breaks, about how many women's circumstances would improve if society built support structures as robust as the infrastructure that protected wealth. The foundation was her attempt to build those structures, to convert lucky break into systematic support. But she knew it wasn't enough. One shelter, one foundation, one wealthy woman's commitment couldn't solve poverty that resulted from economic systems designed to concentrate wealth rather than distribute it. The work would continue long after her money ran out, requiring efforts from thousands of people who recognized that current arrangements weren't natural law, but policy choices that could be different. Her phone buzzed with email notification. Catherine Rodriguez, sending the monthly report from Sunshine Harbor. Maya opened it, scanning statistics that represented lives rather than numbers. 43 families currently in residence. 71% employment rate among program participants. 32 families transitioned to stable housing in the past quarter. 5 families returned to shelter after housing fell through. Cycle of poverty proving more difficult to break than single intervention could address. The report included a testimonial from a resident who'd completed the program. Words that carried weight beyond their simple structure. I came to Sunshine Harbor with nothing but my 2 kids and debt I'd never escape. I was terrified, ashamed, convinced I'd failed. But the staff treated me like someone who'd experienced bad luck rather than someone who deserved judgment. They helped me find work, rebuild credit, save money for security deposit. Today I'm signing a lease on an apartment that's ours. My kids have their own bedrooms. I have a job that pays enough to cover rent and groceries without choosing between them. I'm not rich, but I'm stable, and stable feels like miracle after 3 years of crisis. Thank you for building this place. Thank you for seeing us. Maya read the testimonial twice, feeling tears she hadn't known were building slide down her face. This was what Lin Wei's shipwreck had bought. Not just Maya's security, but ripples of stability extending to families who had no connection to Victorian-era Saffron or maritime salvage law. Her grandmother's stubbornness had transformed into shelter that worked, support that enabled independence, systematic intervention that changed outcomes. She replied to Catherine with approval of the report and request for quarterly planning meeting. There was always more work, more need, more families requiring support that existing systems failed to provide. But tonight, sitting on her porch in house she owned, watching dog patrol yard where daughter slept securely, Maya allowed herself to acknowledge that sometimes things worked out. That long shots occasionally paid off. That stubbornness and faith and sealed copper containers could combine to transform everything. Lily appeared in the doorway. Wrapped in bathrobe Maya had bought her for her 11th birthday, Pepper immediately abandoning patrol duties to escort her to the porch. The girl settled beside Maya, leaning into her mother's side with the casual affection of someone who'd never doubted she was loved even when resources were scarce. "Mom, are you happy?" The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. Lily was asking whether the transformation had been worth it, whether wealth had delivered the contentment poverty had denied, whether their lives now matched the promises Maya had whispered during foster home years, when hope felt more like obligation than genuine expectation. Maya pulled her daughter closer, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo and childhood innocence, thinking about how to answer honestly. "I'm grateful. Grateful for great-grandma's shipwreck. Grateful we can help families at the shelter. Grateful you have stability I couldn't provide 3 years ago. Happy is complicated. I still worry about things, still feel guilty about having so much when others have so little. But yes, baby, I'm happy. Are you? Lily nodded against Maya's shoulder. I'm happy. I like our house. I like Pepper. I like that you don't cry at night anymore when you think I'm sleeping. I like that you smile more now. The observation landed like gentle accusation, revealing how much Lily had perceived during those years when Maya thought she'd successfully hidden adult burdens from her child. But there was no accusation in Lily's voice, just acknowledgement that their lives had transformed in ways that extended beyond houses and bank accounts into emotional territory that couldn't be quantified but mattered more than numbers. I like that I smile more now too, baby. They sat together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter and rescue dog, watching night deepen over yard that belonged to them, in house that couldn't be taken away by landlords or eviction notices or circumstances beyond their control. Somewhere 12 miles off the Oregon coast, the remains of the spice trader Prosperity rested on the ocean floor, its cargo hold emptied of treasure that had waited 133 years to change lives it would never directly touch. Maya thought about Lin Wei filing that salvage claim in 1987, spending money she probably couldn't afford on investment that must have seemed absurd to everyone who knew about it. She thought about her grandmother holding that certificate through decades when it appeared worthless, maintaining faith in possibility when evidence suggested foolishness. She thought about inheriting that claim, spending $650 from overdraft account, gambling on legacy she didn't understand. She thought about all the decisions and circumstances in preserved Saffron that had conspired to transform her family's trajectory, and she felt overwhelming gratitude that stubbornness sometimes resembled wisdom, that faith occasionally proved justified, that long shots paid off more often than pessimism acknowledged. The next morning, Maya drove to cemetery, where Lin Wei rested beneath headstone that listed her name and dates, but couldn't capture the woman who'd worked 3 jobs and bought a shipwreck and believed in unlikely possibilities. Maya knelt beside the grave, placing flowers she'd brought from their garden, speaking to grandmother who'd been gone 3 years, but whose influence had never felt more present. Thank you, Maya said to Earth in memory and the woman who'd planted trees whose shade she'd never seen. Thank you for being stubborn, for holding onto that salvage claim, for believing it might matter someday. You changed everything, Grandma. Not just for me and Lily, but for hundreds of families who'll never know your name, but whose lives you improved through faith that must have felt like foolishness. She stayed at the graveside for 30 minutes, updating Lin Wei on the Foundation's work, on Lily's growth, on how the shipwreck had become mythology that would pass through their family for generations. She told her grandmother about the shelter, about the women whose circumstances mirrored Maya's own near history, about how Lin Wei's investment had been converted into systematic change that would outlast them all. When she stood to leave, Maya felt lighter, as if sharing the story with her grandmother's memory had released weight she hadn't known she'd been carrying. She drove home to house that felt more like home every day, to daughter who was learning that stability was normal rather than aspirational, to life that 3 years earlier had seemed impossible but now felt simply real. The Foundation's work continued, expanding beyond single shelter into network of support services across Portland. Maya partnered with other organizations, learning that collaboration multiplied impact in ways individual effort couldn't match. She leveraged her story, reluctantly at first, then with growing comfort, to attract donors who responded to narrative about lucky breaks and obligations they created. She spoke at fundraisers and conferences, becoming advocate for families experiencing poverty despite working hard and making responsible choices. She testified before City Council about zoning laws that prevented affordable housing development, before state legislature about support services that had evidence of changing outcomes. She learned to use her wealth as platform for amplifying voices of women whose circumstances denied them platforms. Jennifer Morrison became unexpected ally in this work, her volunteer commitment at Sunshine Harbor evolving into genuine advocacy. She leveraged her social networks to attract wealthy donors Maya couldn't access, translating Maya's vision into language that resonated with people whose comfort had insulated them from understanding poverty's reality. The partnership felt unlikely given their history, but effective, proving that people could change when circumstances provided education and accountability. Marcus maintained his weekly dinners with Lily, their relationship developing into something that resembled actual fatherhood rather than performative parenting. He remained flawed, occasionally canceling, sometimes prioritizing convenience over commitment, but present enough that Lily stopped expecting disappointment as default. Maya watched this evolution with cautious optimism, hoping her daughter would experience the father she deserved even if Maya had never experienced the husband she'd been promised. 5 years after the auction, Maya sat in the Foundation's offices reviewing program outcomes with her staff, discussing expansion plans that would require capital campaigns and partnership development and sustained effort that would extend beyond her lifetime. She looked around the conference room at people who'd devoted careers to addressing poverty, who'd chosen purpose over profit, who'd joined her mission because they believed systematic change was possible. "We've served 847 families across 5 years," Catherine reported, statistics that represented lives rather than numbers. 71% achieve stable housing within 6 months. 83% remain stably housed at 2-year follow-up. Those outcomes exceed national averages by 40 percentage points, suggesting our model works. But we're still turning away 5 families for everyone we serve. The need remains exponentially larger than our capacity. Maya nodded, absorbing information that confirmed both success and limitation. They'd built something that worked, proven that comprehensive support could break poverty cycles that conventional wisdom treated as inevitable. But they'd barely scratched the surface of need that existed even in relatively prosperous Portland, let alone broader contexts where poverty was more concentrated and resources more limited. What would it take to double capacity? Maya asked, already calculating budgets and funding sources and partnerships that might make expansion possible. The conversation continued for 2 hours, strategic planning that balanced ambition with reality, dreams with resources, immediate needs with long-term sustainability. By the time they concluded, they'd outlined expansion strategy that would require $8 million in capital funding and significant increases in annual operating budget, ambitious goals that felt simultaneously impossible and necessary. Maya drove home through Portland streets that had become familiar, thinking about her grandmother's shipwreck and how far ripples from that single investment had traveled. She thought about Lily, now 13 and volunteering weekly at the shelter, developing the same stubborn commitment to helping people that Lin Wei had demonstrated through 3 jobs and improbable faith. She thought about her own transformation from woman counting pennies to woman deploying millions towards systemic change, about how wealth had revealed itself as tool rather than solution, enabling work that mattered but not eliminating work's difficulty. She thought about all the women whose lives had improved because copper containers had remained sealed for 133 years, because Victorian-era spice traders had designed preservation systems that exceeded their intentions, because her grandmother had believed in unlikely possibilities. She pulled into the driveway of the Craftsman bungalow, watching Pepper's face appear in the window, tail wagging with the enthusiastic greeting dogs reserved for people they loved, without complication or condition. Lily opened the front door before Maya had exited the car, her expression carrying excitement about something that couldn't wait for her mother to come inside. "Mom, I got accepted to the youth leadership program at the community center. They're teaching us about advocacy and organizing and how to make change in our neighborhoods. Can I do it? Please?" Maya felt pride expand her chest, watching her daughter claim purpose and direction that would shape the woman she'd become. "Of course you can do it. You're going to be amazing at advocacy work." They walked inside together, mother and daughter moving through a house that represented permanence they'd both learned not to take for granted. Maya thought about Lin Wei, about the shipwreck, about all the unlikely circumstances that had conspired to bring them here. She thought about gratitude and obligation, about how lucky breaks created responsibilities that extended beyond personal comfort into systematic change. That evening, after dinner and homework and the comfortable routines that had replaced crisis management, Maya sat at her desk writing email to the foundation board about expansion plans. Her phone buzzed with text from David. Oregon State is naming their maritime archaeology lab after your grandmother. The Maya Chen Center for Historical Maritime Recovery. Thought you'd want to know. Maya stared at the message, emotion building behind her ribs until it threatened to overwhelm her composure. Her grandmother would have an academic center named in her honor, institutional recognition that her investment had advanced knowledge beyond personal wealth. Lin Wei's name would be attached to research that would continue for generations, students learning about maritime preservation in a facility honoring women who believed in shipwrecks when belief seemed foolish. She walked to the filing cabinet where she kept important documents, pulling out the original salvage claim certificate from 1987, the paper yellowed and fragile, Lin Wei's signature still visible at the bottom. She studied her grandmother's handwriting, imagining the woman who'd signed this certificate, who'd paid fees she couldn't really afford for investment that appeared worthless. Thank you, Maya thought, touching the signature like it could transmit gratitude across time and death to reach woman who'd never know how profoundly her stubbornness had mattered. Thank you for believing when belief seemed impossible. Thank you for holding on when everyone told you to let go. Thank you for showing me that sometimes faith in unlikely possibilities is the most rational approach when conventional wisdom offers nothing but despair. She returned the certificate to its protective sleeve, storing it carefully beside other documents that marked their family's history. Someday, she'd pass these papers to Lily, along with stories about shipwrecks and Saffron and grandmothers who worked 3 jobs and believed in possibilities others dismissed. Someday Lily would pass them to her own children, maintaining chain of memory that connected them to women who'd planted trees whose shade would extend for generations. For now, though, Maya had work to complete, foundations to build, families to serve, systematic change to pursue with same stubborn determination her grandmother had demonstrated. She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and continued drafting expansion plans that would require millions of dollars and years of sustained effort and faith that outcomes were possible even when obstacles seemed overwhelming. Outside, stars were emerging in Portland's sky. Same stars that had witnessed the Spice Trader Prosperity's final voyage in 1891, that had looked down on Lin Wei filing her salvage claim in 1987, that were watching Maya convert inheritance into legacy that would outlast them all. The same stars that would witness whatever came next, bearing silent testimony to human stubbornness and unlikely possibilities and the truth that sometimes, against all reasonable expectation, things worked out. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.